Hi everybody, it's just me. I hope you've had a lovely day. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having a chat about some of the top 10 classroom practice for accelerated reader. We've been lucky enough to be working with schools for decades now, so we've been speaking to a good tens of thousands of them, and we've also conducted a lot of research over the years. So we want to share some of our findings with you so that you can apply them into your classrooms and hopefully use these to really help your children progress and also, most importantly, help them become keen readers. So just a few little things before we actually jump in, but Terry's covered a few of these already. Firstly, on the right-hand side, you're going to see a little sort of chat option, and just above there, there's a few buttons. So throughout the session, if you have something you'd like to share, if I ask you a question, you've got a fantastic idea, stick your hand up and I'll be able to open up your microphone so that you can share that with the group. If you don't have a microphone, don't panic at all. We'll be using the chat as well, and I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that. I might also ask you some questions where you can just use the tick to answer yes or the cross to answer no. So if we try one now, nice simple one. Who here is counting down the days till the summer holidays? Give me a tick or cross. I'll be shocked if I see any crosses. Yeah, we're pretty much getting all ticks. If you can't find it, it's just on the right-hand side between the list of people and the chat option. So don't worry, we're really close to the holidays now, only a few weeks to go. You've then got a little emoticon option, a little smiley face. So if you go on today, you've got a few options, so you can tell me how you're feeling. Are you having a fantastic day, a bit of a bad day? Are you pretty much falling asleep over your tea or coffee? On the topic of the coffee cup, if you do have to step away, if you're interrupted, could you quickly stick your coffee cup on just so I know you're not around your desk and I don't go over and ask you a question? So just stick your coffee cup and I'll leave you alone for a few minutes while you deal with whatever it is. But otherwise, feel free to give me a big smiley face or however else you're feeling, and we'll move on to the topic itself. Oh, perfect. So Adam's, he's having a good day. So is Emma. Oh, I'm glad to see everyone's having such a good day. Probably because I mentioned the summer holidays, tell the truth, isn't it? Okay, one final thing. On your chat box at the bottom, can you quickly double check that the little drop-down box is showing all participants? Otherwise, your message might not get through to the correct person. So any message, just send it to all participants and we'll all see it. If there is anything you want to share privately, just share it with either UK Webinar, which is Terry, who's just spoken to, or Rebecca, and they'll be able to help you. So let's get on to the content of it itself. Now, before we do jump in, can I ask you how much you know about the program? And can you tell me by giving me a number in chat from 1 to 5? So 1 being, actually, you're quite new to the program, just coming in to see what you can do with it. And 5 being, you feel really confident about it, you know quite a lot about what you can do and what you can get out of it. So we got the odd 3, but quite a lot of 1s and 2s. So I'm guessing you're all getting started and prepared for the next year. So you're the poor souls who start labelling your books. Okay, and see, Nicola, you have a few IT issues. Don't worry, Terry will come over and help you in just a moment. So we've got the odd form, and most it's about 1 to 3. So you're getting started for training, or you've been using it for a little while, but you're not certain about everything you can get out of it. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Now, the very first best practice might sound a little obvious, but there is a lot you can get out of it. It's actually understanding what star reading and accelerated reader are and how they work together. Now, this is a really vital one because both of these are really important components which work together to help you and help your children. So star reading is the overall reading test which works as a baseline assessment for your children. So first thing comes September, and then it's going to be used throughout the year to check their progress. So it's providing you with information like reading ages, standardized scores, and of course the books your kids should be reading. So you can check they're progressing at the right pace. The great thing about it is it's computer adaptive. So what this means is every single time one of your children answers a question, if they get it right, it gets harder. If they get it wrong, it gets easier. So this means for the kids, it should be quite a stress-free experience. But for you, it means you can get very reliable results within a very short period of time. Now, saying that, you'll notice that I've been calling it a test. You do want to make sure you treat this like a formal assessment. It's online, some of the kids relax, which is a good thing, but we want them to take it seriously. What I generally recommend is think about how you run other assessments, like SATs, and see if you can replicate some of those conditions, whether that's seating arrangements or walking in quietly, that sort of thing. Now, accelerated reader comes in that those are the actual book quizzes the children take. So they take it after they read the book to check their comprehension. The book quizzes are there for two reasons. Firstly, they're hugely motivational. The children love them and they're really fun. But also, it's making sure that that time between STAR tests is being used really productively, that the children are reading the right books, that they're reading enough, and that they're understanding them so that we know they're in a really good position to be progressing. So the STAR reading is a little bit more serious, it's really in your control so you can get the data you need to help the kids. Accelerated reader, it's a little bit more in the kids' control. It's for them to lead and for them to really dive into. So one thing we all know right now is that the expectations for students' reading age, they're pretty high, aren't they? So one thing I want to bring up is a little piece of research we've done. Now, I promise you, I'm not doing this to scare you or anything like that, but I think it's really useful to know. We put the SATs papers, the latest ones, through our levelling system to find out actually how high were they. So you can see that at the top right, paper 1 came out at about 3.7, paper 2 about 5.6, and then Key Stage 2 paper jumped up to a 7.1. Now, for those of you who use the program quite a lot, you'll know what these book levels mean. For those who don't, just glance over to the left, and I've listed the top 10 books for Year 6. This is part of our What Kids Are Reading study we produce yearly. And what you'll notice is that none of those books reach that level. In Year 6, the books children are reading typically are really in the 4s and the 5s. So we really are expecting kids to access text at a really high level, at the same point where they're reading really level 5 like Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I think another way to get an idea about the levels is just glance below and have a look at those GCSE results. These are the levels of the GCSE papers, and you'll notice there's not a huge amount of difference in a lot of these exam papers. In one, which made a good few teachers jaw drop, the SATs paper Year 6 is actually harder than the GCSE paper. So what this does bring up is that you are expected to get the kids up to a pretty high level within a very short amount of time. We understand this. What it also raised for us is the importance of non-fiction reading. I mean, as you'll know, non-fiction is a fantastic way of increasing kids' technical vocabulary, the sort of language they're going to be seeing in these assessments. Just out of curiosity, could you use a little tick or a little cross to tell me whether or not you're using non-fiction books within Accelerated Reader at the moment? So just tick, yes I am using non-fiction a lot, or cross, not got around to it yet. So there's a good few checks, but also you can see there's a lot of schools who've mostly been using fiction at the moment, and that's fine. And as you probably found, fiction was slightly easier for labelling books at the beginning. About a third of our books that are on the system are non-fiction, so it might be worth having a look through your system and seeing which books matched up. It's also great for building links between different areas of the curriculum. If you're trying to find some non-fiction books which link up to these subjects or which are accessible, try popping onto AR Bookfinder or Bookfinder, and you can look for books which might not be on a certain topic, like earthquakes, which are accessible to the children, so it might be a nice way to build links. Yes, and Sharon's made a really good point that it's actually quite difficult to find non-fiction books. We do also work very closely with book suppliers, so we're trying to build up our collection. So if you try going to AR Bookfinder and try going into advanced search, so then you can put in the average book range, average ZPD range of your children and see if something pops up. Also, if you do come up with a series we've not quizzed, please let us know, because that's how our content team decide on which books to quiz on. So that's one thing that's important. Now, if you want to work out if a child is going to be able to access that paper, you can also check, of course, their ZPD range. So that ZPD, it stands for the Zone of Proximal Development, one of Lev Vygotski's theories, if you remember him from training. And it's generated from each STAR test the child takes. So it's that personalised range of book levels that suit that child. So the lower end will be the comfort level. It's books which they should hopefully be able to access, fairly easily, with not too much stress. But the upper end, they're going to be the challenging books. So they're the books which, while they should be able to access, they're going to have to really engage with them in order to understand them. Now, at the very beginning, we do recommend that schools start children on the lower end of that ZPD because we want them to experience success. We want them to feel enthusiastic and get that confidence boost. However, we've conducted research into how best to guide children through books, and we did find that you don't have to step children up to make progress. You can allow them to access the entire range of their ZPD, and it'll still make the progress you want. Now, the trick of this is not just about giving them free range, but it's about responding to their quizzing results. So, if a child decided to take a quiz on, let's say, that McBoing Boing, or Gerald McBoing Boing, which is a book level 3.5, and they pass that quiz, fab. They can move on to harder books, no issue at all. They should be able to choose that book independently. If, however, they don't, then that's the time when you step in and you have that conversation with that child. Was it the book level? Were they trying to access the book? Or equally, was it that book level was too long for them? I see this all the time, that a lot of children, they'll go up the book levels, choosing more difficult text, but also longer books. So they're in fact trying to test and challenge both their memory as well as their reading ability. It's a really common pattern. And of course, they struggle. So having a word with them and seeing perhaps trying to find a book which is at a similar level but shorter. Or how about the actual genre of the book? If you think about a child who's reading, let's say, a series. If a child's a few books into the series, they know a lot about that book already, so they should quite comfortably be able to access something on the upper range of the ZPD because they understand the plot, they understand the characters. If, on the other hand, that book was entirely new to them, I think they'd probably struggle on the upper end immediately, simply because they don't have that background information yet. So it is really important to make sure that children are pausing and thinking about their results before they move on. It's also vitally important to STAR test your children regularly so that they've always got an up-to-date ZPD range. We generally recommend STAR testing about 4 times a year, so based at the beginning and then end of each term. However, absolutely no harm in testing more often. Plenty of schools test half-termly or more frequently if that's what they like. But as I said, just make sure you've got it timetabled in at least that 4 times so you can keep an eye on the children and make sure they've always got up-to-date information. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to ask your point of view of something. And I want to do it through a whiteboard. So just so you know how this works, at the top of your screen, you should see a little arrow. And when you click somewhere, your name's going to appear. Next to that arrow is a little T button text. And if I click there, I can type hello. If you do find that the colour's a little odd, like Claire can see is yellow, which can be quite difficult to see, there's a little colour box. And sorry, I'm about to get rid of all your arrows here. And there's a little box with yellow in it, and you can click on there and change your colour, or maybe simply you've got a favourite colour, you want to choose that instead. So my question to you is that the ZPD range is a little bit more complex than saying go and find just, any book from that box, or go and find a yellow or red. Because it's a little bit more personalised to the children. So have you come up with any ways of sharing that ZPD and helping children guide themselves to books, particularly if they're a little bit younger? So do you give the children their ZPD in a particular way? Do you help them choosing books, or do you have any special techniques? Put your name down on one of those lines or somewhere else on the screen and click on the text and share that. You can also use the text box if you want. We'll be reading your notes under chat as well. And just so you know, you're going to have to click away from your message so we all see it. It won't appear until you click away. So in Claire's school, they choose books for the children. So they take job with them and they help them guide themselves to a book. In Francis, they have it all recorded in their record books. I'd say that's a really good idea, making sure that the children have their ZPD range written somewhere clearly. In one school I visited, this was actually velcroed into the back of their reading log so they could take it with them when picking a book. Yeah, or in Karen's case, it's actually put on stickers. So that can be a really good method, getting it printed out onto stickers so that it can't be lost for one thing. Oh, perfect. So making sure the kids have really clear access to the ZPD range. I love Laura's idea, sorry. In Laura's case, every class, has a librarian. So I'm guessing that's a designated child who really understands the system and can be in charge of guiding children to books and making sure books go back on the bookshelf, I imagine. Oh, that's a really lovely idea. In other cases, other members of staff, whether teachers, TAs, or the children can help. If you're working with younger kids, you can sometimes organise, as in Lara School, that maybe older kids come in and help the younger ones. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for your ideas, everybody. These are really useful. And the main thing we're getting out of this is making sure they're accessible to the children. Okay, sorry, I'm going to be getting rid of your messages. So if anyone is still sharing ideas, I'd suggest just put them back into chat instead. We really appreciate everything you're sharing with us today. Now, the next thing you are not going to be surprised about, daily reading time. Now, we've conducted a huge study into how long children really need to be reading in order to make progress. This study had about 2.2 million children involved in it worldwide, and you can see those results on screen at the moment. Now, what you'll notice is that children begin to make progress once they're averaging around 15 minutes of reading per day. However, their reading growth really accelerates once they get to around 25 to 35 minutes reading per day. Now, because of this, we recommend that children in primary schools, they have at least 30 minutes of scheduled reading per day in the timetable. Now, this may vary a little bit depending on their age and ability. In some cases, it may just be in one big chunk. In others, it may be split into groups, or it may involve books being read to them or them reading with an adult or a buddy. But what I'm about to do in a second is I'm going to actually raise a poll for you guys. And I want to get an idea of how much reading is going on in your school. It's just out of interest to see what the general ranges are. So you're going to see that appear in just a second. And do you have, less than 15 minutes reading per day? Perhaps rely more on home reading? Or do you have 15 to 24 minutes per day? 25 to 34 minutes? Or do you have an incredible 34 or more minutes? How much do you manage to fit into that school day? And if you do manage to fit in a lot, perhaps once we nip back into chat, you can share how you manage to squeeze that in. So I know it can be a challenge with such busy timetables. So at the moment, it's 15 to 24 minutes leading. But there has been one school who get more than 34 minutes per day, which is absolutely brilliant. So only 8 more people to answer, that's 7, only a few more. We'll give it just another 10 seconds or so, and then I will close this poll for you. And we'll have a look at what is the average amount of reading going on. Okay, last 5 seconds, everybody. So the last 6 people, if you could just put in your answers, and then I'll close the poll just a second. Okay, so if I close that, and let's have a look. Okay, so you should be seeing the poll results pop up on your screen. And as you can see, the most common amount of reading is 15 to 24 minutes. That is absolutely perfect. That is that range you see just here. So I would always recommend see if you're trying on the upper end of that range, just for the practical reason of everyone knows that by the time you get children sat down, they find their book, they talk to their friends, all the other little things that kids can distract themselves with, you often do lose out on a couple of minutes. So if you've got 15 minutes, it might be worth seeing if you can squeeze in an extra 5 somewhere. If you're lucky to get the 25, see if you squeeze it up. And often this is a bit of a work in progress. Sometimes schools would increase gradually over the course of a year or over the course of many years. So they work up to that 30 minutes, but without having to have too much of a dramatic impact on timetabling. For those of you who maybe do struggle to get reading time into their classrooms, this data will actually be sent to you as part of the study. So this might be something you could share with a member of SLT and see if you can open up a conversation about it. The other thing you might like to think about is during that reading time to make it really practical, to give IT access to the children so they can take the quizzes. You don't need much IT access. It might just be a couple of tablets if you're lucky, or a couple of computers in the room, just something there so they can take the quizzes. The main thing to bear in mind, I found, is routine. If you have a very solid routine, the children will pretty much run this themselves, leaving you free to actually do all the other things you need to do to help the children learn. Okay, guys, so if you want to close this poll, because it's taking up a little bit on your space on your screen, you'll see on the top right, there's a little button, just on the right-hand side, a little button downwards, and if you click on that, it says Restore Layout. If that doesn't work, then next to the blue row which says poll, you can click on the little white cross, and that will get rid of it as well. Fab. So hopefully you're all seeing the right stuff. So if you've got that reading time in and hopefully you've got the books available, you then want to make sure that all that time, all the resources that are being dedicated to this are really being used effectively. So we have a few tips to help you make the best use out of that time. Oh, Nikki, I am incredibly jealous of you right now. All our teachers eating cake as we go through the training. I'm afraid we can't offer cake to you all, but hopefully you all at least have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Oh, and Kevin has a very good point where they've got scheduled reading each day, but they encourage children to come in early and read. So that is as a default activity. It's a great idea. I spoke to one school, then in the summer, they take books out into the playground for kids to read before school on beanbags, which I thought was a lovely use, and also made sure the kids still got a bit of the sun in the morning. So one tip we have for getting really good use out of your reading time is to make sure you've got reading logs in place. Now, some schools still have these, others move away from them, I know, but we really do recommend them, and for a few reasons. Firstly, it gives the kids ownership of their reading. While the data is available online, having it physically there means both they and you can have a look at their log at a glance and check how they're progressing, or to get ideas of which book will suit them best next. Also, it means that they can keep a record of books which they never got round to quizzing. This may be because they just gave up on it. You know, some kids, they do have a tendency to abandon books before they get around to finishing them. Hopefully, if they're picking books within the ZPD range, it should happen less because they should understand the books. They're not giving up on books because they're too challenging. But also, there may be the odd book which they read which isn't quizzed, which is absolutely fine. We've not got around to every book in the world, so we're working on it. So it means they have a record of those, so you don't have the issue where you're going up to a child and having a go at them because they're not been reading all week just to find that they've been reading a book from home, say. So it's worth keeping a record of this. In some schools, they just simply have so maybe a printout, like a table, and you can actually find a few examples of these on your Renaissance Place website. If you go into Accelerated Reader Resources, there's a little area called Forms and Charts, and we've got a whole range of reading logs, which are personalised to different reading abilities. We've also got a few available, like the one you can see on screen, which we'll make sure we share with you when we email you. But out of interest, can I ask, does anybody have any extra pages in their reading logs? Do you give pages for kids to write their plot of the story down, to write their notes? Do they keep additional information about picking books out? Does anyone have any extra ideas? Also, if you've got any ideas, do feel free to stick your hand up, and I will open up the chat because I'd love to have your ideas about how we can really make the most of those records. Especially, I'm sure you spend so much time trying to keep them neat and make sure they're not lost. Does anybody give your kids opportunities to write down the plot of the story? Do you give them templates with questions or ask them to write notes? Stick it in chat if you have. Yeah, so Christina had at one school where they had to write reviews, so book reviews. So that can be a really good idea. In some schools, I've seen them put up on displays. Yep, and as Nick said, these are available, so you can always access these anywhere you wish. I'm working with one school at the moment, and they give the kids additional pages where they can, as I said, write notes to go through. For the younger year groups, they're templates. So it's giving them spaces to write facts down if it's non-fiction, or ask them to describe characters, that sort of thing. Once they move into older years, it's just blank pages and the kids are expected to come up with their own ideas. So they're really weaned into it, and that's a really nice idea. And Sharon's raised a really good point that having it down on paper means that you can share it with parents to get parents involved, which is such an important part of the program, making sure you've got parents engaged. And we're doing another webinar nearer to Christmas, I know that's a while away, which is specifically around helping parents get involved. Oh, and Nikki also says that they tweet about the kids. I love that idea. Please send all your tweets over to us. We love sharing and shout out all the kids who are doing well with Accelerated Reader. So that's brilliant, thank you. The other thing that is vital is about checking kids' quiz results quickly. Now, I'm sure you all sort of celebrate when children get the 80s or 100%, but you may have heard us talking about an average of 85%, and that can be a little confusing because unless they're taking 20-question quizzes, which are rare, they can't get 85% in one quiz. Now, the answer to this is that we are interested in their averages, we're interested in their general trends. Because the children may do a little bit badly on one odd quiz, that's not the end of the world, as long as they correct for it. So what you'll see is that children make the most growth quite significantly when they're averaging 85 to 95%. And if they go far below that, they really don't make the growth you want. But you'll notice that they start making less growth when they're averaging about 100%, 95 to 100%. Anybody got any clues over why they don't make the growth we want if they're averaging close to 100%? Feel free to stick it in chat or raise your hand if you've got a microphone. So with Sharon, it's not sufficiently challenged. Yep, too easy. Everyone's got it perfectly. And as Liz says, picking at the lower end, some children, they get a little bit scared to move on to the upper end of the ZPD. Which is understandable. They know it's more challenging. So it can be a case of just slowly guiding them up a little bit. That's absolutely perfect. So getting 100% is perfect. We want them to succeed. But if you notice that they're getting 100% too often, perhaps that's the time to guide them onto harder books. So that's one thing. The other thing that I will mention is that, as you know, that's their PD range. It's got an upper end and a lower end. And often schools tell children they have to pick books within there. Now, there is, however, a little rule one process which breaks that. If a child is picking books above their ZPD range, but they're averaging between 85 to 95%, that is absolutely fine. So if you've got children who do want to read above that, and you think that they're doing okay with their reading, they've got a good high average right now, you can feel free to let them do that. Just keep an eye that their results don't drop. In fact, this is where the most learning and most growth overall occurs, is if they're being challenged above their ZPD even, but maintaining a nice high average % correct. So that's something often to bear in mind, especially with your gifted and talented kids who sometimes need to be stretched a little. Now, when it comes to discussing the results of the children, you'll see there's a few ways of doing it. You've got the TOPS report, which is what is generated after they take the quiz. So every time they take the quiz, they get the results, and that's going to be on that first screen. They click a button to view it. TOPS report stands for the opportunity to praise students, or one of my favourite ones is tons of praise. And you see it gives information about that book, the progress over the term, and what you can't see is the progress over the year, like how many words they've just read. Now, this is a great option if, for example, you want to involve parents early on, because you can just send it out to them. However, for those of you who don't want paper coming out of printers too much, you also go to their progress page and you see it's just on the top right, and you get the averages there. So you can see what the average % correct is, and if it's below 85, you can then go and have a chat with them about how to pick their next book. You can even go to the bookshelf to have a look at all the historical reads to see actually where they've gone well, where they've gone wrong. So it's really important to have those conversations with the children. And what you find is that once you've had those conversations a few times, the children will start taking the initiative themselves. So they'll start taking the lead so that you don't have to guide them to every book. Now, this process of talking to the children and guiding them to books is what we call taking the stage of the class. This is basically your role in Accelerated Reader. It's about being a guide for them rather than sort of actually taking them and giving them the books themselves. So during the reading time, you want to be having a chat with those children who maybe they've just taken a quiz and they've done well, so you can make sure you're giving them loads of praise. Or have a chat with those children whose results aren't looking so good to make sure that they know what they need to do to pick their next books so they do well, or have a chat about what adaptations you can make. Now, I can't go into as much depth as I'd like to today, but on our site, we've got an area called Video Tutorials. Got a link here, and this will be sent to you. And then you can actually go in and have a look at a couple of classes in action. So these are real classes with real teachers having conversations with real kids. So have a look in there and have a look and see what sort of topics come up. Now, when you have a class of 30, you can't talk to everybody. We know that, it's too busy. So how do I identify which kids require your help most? So this all comes down to the diagnostic report. Can I have a tick or cross based on who brings this up regularly? Who uses this at least, say, once a month? Tick if you use it once a month, or cross if you don't use it very frequently, or perhaps you've not actually seen this yet. Yeah, and a bit of a mix, so it might be that some of you are quite early on your training, so that's understandable if you've not seen this. And just so you know, if you are early on in training, I saw a few ones earlier, this will be covered in a lot more depth when a coach starts to visit you a little bit later on. Okay, so when it comes to this report, the idea of this is it summarises everything that's going on in your classroom, and then it looks for patterns, so it can actually flag up the children that would be a little bit concerned about. So there's a lot of information on this, but let me just point out which are the most important. Now, at the beginning, you're really going to be interested in these two. RP quizzes taken and passed, so that's reading practice quizzes taken and passed, and sentence correct. So as you know, we're aiming for 85% or above. So at the beginning, you want to be checking that, yes, children are getting involved, that you're getting lots of quizzes taken, and that the majority of them are being passed. If you've got a child who's failing a lot, for one thing, their confidence is probably heading downhill. They could do with a bit of assistance from you. In terms of average percent correct, as I say, we're looking for children between 85 to 95%. Now, what can really, really help is when you look at this report, there's an option to sort it by average percent correct, highest to lowest. So it will sort the kids with 100% at the top, kids with the lowest average percent correct, like Thomas here, at the bottom. And that means you can easily prioritize the children. That's one thing I would recommend. On the far right, you've got engaged time. Now, of course, we're not sitting there spying on the children, so we don't know exactly how long they're reading, but this is based on quite a complex algorithm. It looks at our knowledge of the children's ability, so based on their STAR test, and it looks at what sort of books they're reading, how many points they've earned. So we get that information together and we say, well, if they've earned this many points and got this reading ability, then they've likely been reading for this amount of time. Now remember, we know children start to progress when they're averaging around 15 minutes or more. So you'd be really paying attention to those children who are averaging less than 15 minutes. So have a look at this. Can I ask you which children you'd probably be focusing on first? Which child would you be grabbing next time you saw them in class? So feel free to stick your hand up or stick it in chat. It's got Thomas popping up. Yep, Thomas, a few of them. Yep, this teacher is quite lucky. She's only got a few kids now. I know you'll have more than that, but this is for an example. So Thomas here is only averaging 46%. That's only passed 50% of their quizzes, which has resulted in the fact they've actually got engaged reading time of only 4 minutes. So we know that Thomas here is in real danger of not making the progress we want. So when it comes to assisting Thomas, there might be a few things you do. It might be to do with book choice. So it might be a case of sitting down, looking at their reading log with them, and seeing where they're going wrong with that. Perhaps Thomas is simply picking books which are far above his ZPD. It might be that actually Thomas really struggles with his memory. So maybe it's coming up with strategies of how you could help Thomas with that. Or, I mean, the fact he's only averaging less than 50%, it might indicate he needs a little bit of extra support, really from either an adult or maybe another child in their class, maybe an older pupil, to go in and do some one-to-one work with him. Because right now, you can flag up the fact that Thomas isn't in a position to be making progress, so you'd want to be correcting that. Once you feel Thomas has been constantly worked with, he's got some next steps in place, and that's where you can kind of move on to these children like Henry and Alice, who are borderline, not quite where we want them, but they're not far off. When it comes to this report, it can be a little bit confusing, I know, at the beginning, to keep track of who you've spoken to, who you haven't. Can I ask, for those of you who do this report, do any of you keep a special record of who you speak to? I mean, if so, do you use a Dynamic report? Do you scribble on it? Or do you have a special log where you record your targets you set the children? Is there any special way you keep track of which children you're concerned about and what you've asked them to do? Yeah, I mean, if you stick it in chat, if you do, or if anyone's come up with a really great way, do stick your hands up, and I'd love to have a quick chat with you. So it's something I know a lot of schools struggle with. Yes, so mostly it's making notes and reports, and this does tend to be the easiest. So you can just quickly scribble down what you've done. And a quick tip I found is make sure you keep a record of these. So the next week you can flip backwards and check, have the children done what you've instructed them to do? You know, has Henry gone and picked a new book which is a little bit lower down in ZPD, or has he picked a book higher? So that really works, keeping a record of it. So yeah, or also Kevin says that they write it in the children's individual reading file. That's a really good point as well. So whether this is particularly for you, or even if you have somewhere spaced at the back of their reading log, and you can actually flip back and see what target you set them. This is actually a really good option if you've got multiple adults working with them. Because often, of course, you've got a few adults, a TA, a teacher, maybe a second teacher, and you're all talking to them and setting different targets, and then you've got one very confused child in front of you. So having a place where you can all see what the next steps are, so they don't have too many targets coming from different directions. So that's absolutely perfect. So when it comes to this report, if people do have questions about it, then just let your coaches know. I don't know if you've got any training left, or if you've still got training to come, part of your original training. We can go through it in a little bit more depth. The other thing that we do have to help you is that we've recently created an implementation timeline. Basically, it takes you step by step through the different terms, and it shows you each of the main steps of that term and the resources which are linked to it. Now, a new resource we've recently released is the day-to-day guide. This is all the key information you need to know, and it includes information like how to find that diagnostic report. So feel free to pop into there. Actually, if I take you there now, hopefully you can see it. And if I scroll down, and I'm in fact going to go right down to the bottom to task 10, and you've got a day-to-day guide. You've also got the Safe for Class videos here, so you can just go in and see what do other teachers do with it. So do feel free to go into there. They're really good resources. They're saying that I should probably say that, as I made one of those myself. Now, we're almost finished, don't worry. There's only a couple of other things which I want to bring up. So you know what you want the kids to be working towards, but the question is, do the children? You know, it's really important for children to know, how much they expect to read, and of course to know that things like what they expect to average. So on the system, we have something called reading practice targets. Can I have a tick or cross, depending on whether or not you know how to set these up? So tick if you do, or cross if you don't know how these are set up. So this is interesting. So it may just be that these covered a long time ago, or you've not covered them yet, but targets are fantastic. And they'll also, just to confirm, they're not difficult to set. They don't take long at all. If you go to that day-to-day guide that I mentioned, there's going to be a step-by-step on how to get them set up. So there's 3 targets for children. We've already focused on average percent correct. That's about the quality of reading. They've then got a second target called points. Points is about the quantity of reading. Basically, every single book is allocated a certain number of points based on the length. So the shortest books are half point, the longest is War and Peace at 118 if you do fancy that. But when it comes to their same targets, we know what their reading ability is. So we can say realistically, this child, if they read for say 20 minutes, should be able to earn this many points. Now, the children only earn the points if they pass the quiz, so they can't just take random quizzes. But that way, you can track, are they reading enough for their ability level? And the lovely thing about this is if you've got a very hard-working, low-ability reader in your class, then they are very likely to beat that gifted and talented child who may be a fantastic reader ability-wise, but actually isn't very keen. So you can actually reward that low-ability reader for the effort. For this age range, we recommend setting these targets half-termly, by the way, so that you get 6 points in a year where you can reward the children, and they do have a chance to sort of restart if perhaps they weren't as keen or they lose motivation later on. The final target is book level. Book level is about the challenge. Now, There is a tendency for people to set book level target to maybe midway through the ZPD. I would actually recommend setting this book level target to the lowest end of their ZPD. Now, I know this sounds a little bit odd, but the reason is that if you imagine you're a child and you look at your target and it's halfway through your ZPD range, are they ever going to want to read below it? Are they ever going to read the lowest end? It's unlikely because you've told them not to. If you set it at the lowest end possible, then they know what the minimum level of book club they should be choosing is. If you have a child who they're kind of dawdling at the lower end, you may like to go in and correct that, but at least you've got the option. You can do that individually. So it's worth having a look at those. Always remember you've got to take a STAR test first. So come September, first step is to do a STAR test and then set these. But then the children know what they're working towards, and you can always run a reward, like a prize, or say, whoever gets a target is put their name put in. The other nice thing is if you started to get Home Connect up and running for parents, they're informed of how well the child is doing. Now, just so you know, there's two different views for targets. If they're in years 3 and below, they get a nice little sunflower hour. So it fills up as they earn the points, and the sun grins at them if they're doing well with the average percent correct. Or if they're older, year 4 and above, they get the actual progress bars. So you can see how far they are into the school year and which their targets are doing well or not doing well with. You can change this, by the way, under Accelerated Reader Preferences, so you can actually choose which view the kids see. And Lara, you can set this up for an entire class. So you can basically go in and you can set a class up within typically maybe 5 minutes, I'd say. So 5 minutes a half term to get it all set up. Okay, so that's the one thing I wanted to mention. Now, what this also raises is, I think, the funnest aspect of the program, rewards. Now, we know that in terms of rewards, reading itself should be something that they enjoy doing, they look forward to doing. But having additional rewards and celebrations can really create enthusiasm for reading, create that culture of reading in the school. And when it comes to this, I really recommend having a bit of a variety. Keep changing it, keep the kids engaged. So you might like to actually reward children's achievements for reading. So it might be like someone's achieved their target, or on the one on the right, which we thought was fantastic, that's 100% tree. Every single time the children got 100%, their name got put on the Christmas tree, and then a prize draw was made at the end of the term. This is often themed near Halloween, it's ghosts. In the summer, it could be clouds, that sort of thing. But also celebrate reading in itself. We really like the school here sent us a picture of their doors. They had a decorated door competition to see which book and which characters represented the class best. As you can imagine, this class here was probably a little bit of an interesting one to teach with all these personalities. But really have a lot of fun with it. And I'd recommend also thinking about it a little strategically. Have a look at your data and see which areas may need help. Is it that your kids are struggling with average percent correct? Or are you really struggling to get them to read enough? And organise the next term's activity around that. So I've got a few of my ideas on here, but could everybody, either using chat or using the whiteboard or putting their hands up, actually tell me what rewards have you been using? Has anybody got some ideas which have worked amazingly well, or they're really looking forward to putting in place once they've got Accelerated Reader up and running? Remember, if you want to use the whiteboard, it's just a little arrow, and then just type. Otherwise, stick your hand up if you've got a great idea, something went really well this year, and you think someone else could replicate it in their classroom. So Bruce said they had a class dojo. Okay, Bruce, I might need you to explain that, actually. That's an interesting one. Bruce, do you mind if I stick on your microphone? Because I'm interested to see what that is. So I've just unmuted you. I don't know if you're able to speak and explain that.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
A little bit quietly, but if you shout, I'm sure we all can.
It's an online behaviour management resource.
So I don't know if anyone else has been using that, but you could actually link up your different reward schemes.
You can link parent stuff as well.
Oh, that's a really good idea. So it links up. Other schools have done it with house points. Sorry, I'm going to mute again, but thank you, Bruce, for sharing. Or this time of year, a few schools have linked up to the sports day. So points for doing sports, but also points for reading. Word Millionaires is very popular. Remember, we got those certificates online which you can personalise. I mean, primary schools, you'd be surprised to have a lot of Word Millionaires. But if you think yours are a little bit younger, perhaps having half millionaires first or quarter millionaires, win your way up. If they're very young, maybe you could do it as a class, and you create a little tracker on the wall. Or as Jo says, they vary it, so they do different ones based on word count, 100%. And you might give out special books, or as Kevin said, special mentions in assembly, or I can't remember who it was who mentioned it, mentions on Twitter. You know, kids absolutely love that, or I imagine the parents like their child being mentioned as well. Let's see what else you have. Yeah, a lot of people doing word counts. Or Nikki saying that it looks like there was an iPad up for grabs. I imagine that was incredibly popular. A few other schools have done Kindles. So some schools do it based on targets. Each term, if you achieve your target, your name's put into a hat. And in one case, at the end of the year, a child who achieved every single one of their targets, again, they had another prize draw for a Kindle or something else incredible. Or one are based on improvement, that's good. What was Sports Day coming up? Last year, I had a school where kids could earn to actually throw wet sponges at the head teacher. So I don't know if we've got any heads there, but don't know if they'd want to put themselves through that. Every time they had a success over the final week, each 100% or something like that, got them a wet sponge to chuck at the teacher. In another case, it was an ice cream. You know, they got to actually have an ice cream when an ice cream van came in. And book tokens are also really good. Seeing which else we've got, because these are fantastic ideas, everybody. Thank you so much. Nikki's good one, actually. They also use blogs. So I'm guessing that can also share other information like kids' book reviews. So that's helping that culture of reading, as well as rewarding individual children. So that's a really good point. And I'm sorry, I've lost half your name. I think it's Karen Thompson. So it's not also about giving stuff away. You don't just have time on Kindles. Or as some of schools have found, if you've got a couple of bean bags, give children the right to read on a beanbag rather than on their, slightly uncomfortable classroom chair. Yeah, they might really have a bit of a fight about that. Or the class that does best, they get to go out 5 minutes early at break. Maybe get to have the first pick of the balls or the toys. So these are absolutely fantastic ideas, everybody. And it's all about creativity. If you want some ideas, you can always pop onto social media, things like Twitter. You have a lot of people out there, or Facebook. A lot of schools post their ideas onto there. So, and if you do have a great idea, something works, please do share it with us. Because while we want the children to progress, that's one thing we want them to do. The most important thing for us is that we're building this cultures of reading in your school. We're helping you create children who just love to read. If you want a few further ideas, if you pop onto the videos area, the video tutorials area, there's a lovely video from Marlow Primary School. And I think that gives you plenty of great ideas on how you might want to get kids enthusiastic. So do bear in mind that school's been using it for a while, so you have to apply everything all at once. And actually, Nikki's raised a really good point. Praise. The kids love it. In the end, just getting a regular praise from a teacher and other adults, it works absolutely perfectly. In many schools, the right to go to your head teacher or go to a special adult and tell them that they've just gotten 100%, that can be enough. Just simply the chance to tell the teacher that they've done well their reading, that works perfectly. Also, thank you very much for sharing your ideas. I think they're all brilliant. Also saying that I've got to say Karen's one idea of having a basket of books outside at break time with picnic blankets. I think I'd rather like to have that in the office. Okay, so I'm going to close this down. So if anyone I'm scribbling ideas down, I'm going to close down in just a second. So they're still coming in. Picnic postcards home, or a couple of schools have done calls home. You know, it's not often that parents get to receive calls about children just doing incredibly well. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, but these are amazing. Thank you so much. So we're going to finish off in just a moment, but just before we do, we've covered quite a lot in this last 55 minutes. So before we disappear, again, just using the little arrow on the whiteboard, choosing the chat option, can you put down which was maybe the most important best practice that you spotted, whether it's something which maybe you weren't aware of originally, or something you thought that really stuck out at you as being something you're going to want to go off and have a think about, maybe going to talk to your colleagues about. So there were a few there. There was reading time, reading logs, making sure everyone's really understood the program and will start testing well. Which were the most important ones to you, which you think you'll need to go back and have a look at? So there's targets popping up. Yeah, that's something that I think it's so simple, so easy, but you get a lot of benefit from it. I mean, one piece of research found that simply by setting targets, you can increase kids' reading by as much as 75%, which sounds absolutely bonkers, but it just shows the importance of targets and kids having something to work towards, knowing what's expected of them. Yeah, Nikki, just being enthusiastic, just making sure children understand why reading is so amazing, why we want them to read so much. Yep, and Christina, reading time, as we're trying to aim for 30 minutes. If you can get that in, absolutely perfect. If it's a struggle, see if you can work up to it, or see if you can maybe get an extra 5 or 10 minutes in a different part of the day. Yeah, that could be fine. In some cases, schools have put it in after lunch, for example, for the added benefit of calming the children down for afternoon lessons. I went into one school and they had so much spa music going on, I think everyone felt rather chilled out. Yeah, and Susan is making sure kids understand accuracy. That's something that's really important, understand that quality of reading. It's actually more important than quantity. Quantity is something that can come in later on, but they really need to understand how to pick books and how to read them accurately. And Kevin, yet that we're going to be doing a range of training sessions, and the one I'm talking about is a little bit nearer Christmas, so everyone gets time to get back in the swing of things, build up some data, so that by the time you really get parents involved, actually you've got some data to show off for them. And making sure kids are looking at their results. That's really important. There's a tendency for children, especially younger ones, just to click out of the site or exit the iPad the moment they finish the quiz. Getting them to pause, have a look at their results, see how they're doing over that term. You know, share it with their friends. What we'd love to hear is more of a, you know, I'm 80% through my target rather than I'm reading green books or I'm reading 5.2s. We want children to be proud and showing off about how much effort they're putting in. And someone seeing the diagnostic report average percent correct, that's useful. Just pretty work from really the bottom up. Pick 5 children a lesson. It doesn't have to be many, and work your way up. Then you will make progress. You will get through everybody, but it won't feel like a never-ending job. We know things are busy enough. Just focus on children who need it most. Work your way through. Okay, guys, we're going to be finishing off in just a second, and we're going to end the recording. That's going to be closing in just a moment, but I will be hovering around, and so will Becca and Terry. So we'll be answering all your questions. So thank you so much for all your ideas, thank you for participating, and thanks for hanging around after school. I hope you have a lovely afternoon.